Building major housing projects in Canada is a complex and rather nuanced process. And aligning the vision and the values and the needs of a community from both the developer and the city, it can come with its challenges. That's where Gary Pooni and his incredible skill set comes to play. Gary Pooni is an urban planning and land development consultant located here in Vancouver. He has nearly 30 years of urban planning experience, and he has spearheaded some of the country's most significant projects throughout Metro Vancouver, Vancouver Island, the Sea to Sky Corridor, Alberta, and Ontario. Gary is ultimately the bridge between developers, cities, and communities. His firm helps developers navigate complex zoning laws, permitting processes, and tracking compliance within each local development standards. To date, Pooni Group has guided more than 800 ventures through all phases of the development process in over 25 Canadian municipalities. To quote their website, a successful outcome not only accomplishes each project's unique vision, but also creates lasting positive relationships with the surrounding community. Gary, thank you so much for being here today.
Great, thanks, Dan. That's quite the intro. I've gotten so old I've forgotten I'd worked on some of that stuff. Ryan, yeah, thank you both for having me.
Yeah, no, we're very excited about this, and yeah, I think it speaks to the legacy. When you've done so much, I bet it becomes a bit of a blur, but ultimately the proof is in the pudding, and so quite a rewarding career.
Or you're just forgetting about it like it was some sort of trauma you lived through. You don't want to remember it. That's a possibility.
That I feel you. I bet there's definitely a bit of both. I know I've done some deals that I have, my brain is just basically blocked out. But So let's dive in here. Gary, you and your group, you clearly provide a very unique and a very valuable service. Can you speak to more of the specifics of what the Pooni Group does and maybe share an example of what that looks like for a development in Vancouver?
Yeah, sure. I have to tell you, Dan, Ryan, I get this question once a week, once every couple of weeks. It's like, what exactly do you do? Is kind of how I've known you for a while, but I don't know what you're up to. So part of it is the work that we do. The work we do is high profile, and we try to stay low profile. It's just a bunch of stuff that needs to be done behind the scenes to get good projects approved through a municipal, provincial, or a federal maze. So that's sort of the first part of who we are. The second is we're somewhere in between being marriage counselors or development doctors, and much more being development doctors. So that is the sort of technical urban planning role of what we do. There's 2 or 3 parts of getting housing development projects approved. There's a technical part, technical requirements. There's a communications piece to it, which is a public-facing part of the project. And then ultimately, there is a political process that you need to go through. So it's those 3 things that we work on. They are not all large projects. Some of them are small. One of them is a 40-unit project that we're doing some triage on that is having some great difficulties at a city hall and running into some issues, and they called us very late. And just like you would call your doctor, sometimes you call them early and sometimes you call them late. We are known for a few really big projects. Oak Ridge Center was one that a lot of people are aware that we were the planners on. Mirvish Village in Toronto, we were the planners working on that one. We worked on, the reimagination of Curry Barracks in Calgary. And then there's a 5-tower project in Victoria, Harris Green Village, which is probably the biggest rezoning in recent memory that was approved in that city. So there isn't an exact science to what we do. It is the 30 years of experience that you referenced, Dan, that we draw from, and various levels of expertise in our team here, from communications to technical planners.
Yeah, Gary, appreciate the answer. It sounds like a lot of what you do is very similar to that of a doctor, and you can really only sort of help them once you have that patient sort of on the operating table open in front of you, and then you're sort of getting in there, dissecting where the problems are and finding solutions. Because I would imagine when somebody asks you what you do and it's a difficult kind of question to answer all the time, it's because you're doing different things all the time.
Yeah,
Um,
correct.
yeah. But speaking specifically here to the rezoning process in Vancouver, especially for major developments, it's well known it can take years and years and quite often results in the prevention of new housing over time being built. And it does, and it can keep prices elevated, if not. I mean, you've got more and more people chasing fewer and fewer goods. That has upward pressure on price. So, can you shed some light on? Because I've spoken to so many people, and there's so many different answers, and there's so many perspectives on why this process takes as long as it does. And I'm wondering if if you can explain that a little bit, and how your group maybe helps these developers navigate this, like you mentioned, this maze of government process to a successful outcome.
Oh boy. Okay. How would I describe this? I have in jest told people that we are also like city hall laxatives. And when you have an application that is stuck in the pipeline and it is clogged up somewhere, we help speed that up. Just push it through. So it is a funny and humorous analogy, I guess. But I don't think that we have ever come into a municipality and a developer or the public has said to us, whoa, 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 City Hall moves too fast in its process. I think people who don't like development or are really opposed to change are asking for something to slow down. But in actuality, I don't think that in any of those cases it has actually gone too fast. They're just not happy with the result. It's not an issue with speed. You're better off saying, I just don't like what the outcome is. The city of Vancouver has its own charter. It has some of its own rules. And it's not the underpinnings of zoning from 100 years ago, which you could argue had some racist and segregated neighborhoods that were created. The zoning 100 years ago said, hey, this is a good idea to put the center of economy here. Let's put factories over here, and we will put parks in around here. We'll put a population of people here around the city and around the factories that are of certain ethnicity across North America. And then we'll put single family homes kind of up all over here. So think of Shaughnessy and British properties. British properties up until 2021 had charges on title and covenants that said people of African and Asian races were not allowed to be occupants of the homes there up to 2021. This is stuff that's written in zoning and housing regulation. So there has just been a legacy of planners, and me being one, under this high level of control and regulation. So if you talk to city planners, they would say that it's required. If you talk to people in the development industry, they'll say that it's too heavy. Some point over the last 20 years, the pendulum swung much more towards regulation. And regulations would just continue building up on top of each other. You could say that there's an overregulated environment. Some would say that there is a bureaucratic ego that also developed. And this sort of culture of customer service at city halls and working with applicants as your clients and your customers, that level of customer service just wasn't there. I would say that is true of having been a repeat customer of that historically. It is starting to change. It is. And the status quo around the creation of housing had to change. And everyone had to look at themselves and take some responsibility. A lot of finger pointing was going on. So that moment, I think, has occurred. The question was largely around the city of Vancouver, they've got a good group of leaders now that understand that the model of housing creation needs to change. That's a long first part of an answer. The shorter second part is it really took the provincial government, this recent provincial government, to say the housing approval process is broken and we need to make some changes. So the minimum guidelines for the TOAs, the transit-oriented areas, and around small-scale multi-unit housing, which has a very bright future ahead of itself as a new housing product over the next 10 years, 20 years, will start to transform the way that we live and our neighborhoods. Those are the roots of the problem that I had outlined, and where I think we are headed, hopefully, down a better path and some positive solutions. Traditionally, it has been very slow, very regulated. You also have no idea how long it is going to take when you submit a major rezoning application into a city. There's no clock ticking. There's no timeline. It's the only industry where there is no deadline. It could take a year. It could take 2 years. You're really at the mercy of the internal process and the person that is advancing the file, really. So it's the only industry that doesn't really work with those hard deadlines.
It seems unfair when you've got somebody on the other side who's paying potentially tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars in interest or more every month holding this property, which in turn, when you look further down, you see how that price impacts the future buyer 5 years or 8 years from now. I find it very strange that level of respect for the process, I guess, isn't respected.
Yeah. And I don't want to be harping on, it's easy for us on this side of the fence to be pointing at City Hall. I've worked in municipal government, federal government, and in the private sector. So the only level of government I haven't worked in was a provincial ministry, although I was on a provincial ministerial board. So I've experienced the 3 levels of government and the private sector. The people inside City Hall working would say that we don't have the capacity to deal with this. And I would agree. It's just like any other company. You've got people that are outstanding and can work fast, and there's others that don't. So there's the human capital side of it, and it's just like any other company or entity where that is. And that's harder to control. The easier part is, can we give some certainty when it comes to some of the rules and guidelines? If you do that and the rules are clearer and less onerous, that should, in theory, take some time off.
Yeah, so it sounds like it's a very obviously complex process. And as somebody who's truly sort of in the weeds, you must also be very aware that I think Canada is one of the slowest in the G20 as far as being able to take, from concept to completion when it comes to building homes. And so it's not like these problems haven't been solved by other areas. So I guess maybe, if you were in a position of extreme power, let's say a premier or prime minister, and your sole goal was to improve the speed of getting houses completed, I mean, can you share what maybe some of the fundamental changes would be? And is it as simple as more personnel, or do you incentivize people? Look, instead of saying, look, there's no time frame as to when you got to rubber stamp this thing, but if you do it sooner, maybe you're financially incentivized or whatnot. Like how can this start to be fixed? Because it just seems to be so extreme that, even the leading politicians are campaigning on improving speed of development times across the whole country.
Yeah. Okay. I've never had the ultimate power question before.
Helps frame it up, right? Like, you drop the hammer, where's it getting dropped?
Here we go. Having worked in other jurisdictions, having traveled to other cities, there's stuff that we do here well, which there's an incredible high level of architecture, amenity, and investment in social infrastructure that happened in the 90s and the late 2000s, sort of somewhere in there, when the rise of condo development and the old phrase of Vancouverism, right? The 3 of us are old enough to remember that Vancouverism was the thing. No one's really talking about it anymore, but it was just the densification of the downtown. And, those projects, when we came out of a decade-long recession in our industry in the 90s, were happening quite quick. And the perception around change and land development and new homes was positive. There's a time after the financial crisis of 08, 09 and the 1%ers that something really started to change. So there was a great, it wasn't just here, right? It was everywhere. People think that housing and these urban issues are only an issue in Vancouver. They're not. You'll hear the same in Seattle, San Francisco for sure. areas around Los Angeles, Portland, head into New York, up and down the Northeast coast. You hear the same things, Toronto as well. That's context. If there was a few things that an ultimate authority could change, what would they be? I would allow the really low density stuff, single family homes and duplexes, triplexes, and then ultimately up to 4-story, go through a very quick approvals process. And there's no reason that a single family home and permits and occupancies and inspections, all that stuff that goes into it, needs to take up that much time. Very frustrating for people that are building just that single home or 2 or 3 on a site to be told, we cannot get you your occupancy permit or release your building permit. The clock ticks for these people. I had somebody call me, a friend, who said, I can't get someone to do an inspection on our new house. We're moving out of our current place and we're told that this place would be ready, and we still gave ourselves 3 months cushion. We can't get anyone in from the city for 3 months after this. So this is now a 6-month delay. We have nowhere to go. We have to pack up our stuff. We sold our house and people are moving in. I don't know what to do. That's the level of bureaucratic backlog and constipation that is created when we don't need to have so many rules for that level of housing. That then clears up a lot more qualified staff to work on the things they should be working on. My father had to deal with a 5-foot tall street tree that was planted at our family home in New Westminster many years ago. And a stop work order came in because someone in their truck had dumped a pile of dirt right beside the tree and held up that house and its construction for about a week or so. To the point where my dad had to go out there, poor guy, and he had a heart attack actually when he was shoveling all that dirt away to get it off of this 5-foot newly planted street tree because of a building inspector at the time. It's why do you think people are upset about government and bureaucracy and process and all of this? It's not just big developers, it's everyone that feels this. It's an incredible high level of control on things that just don't need to be that way. So there has to be, with technology and AI, that municipalities need to get on board. And I know it's going to upset a number of these civic workers' unions if jobs are getting replaced with better alternatives. So it's not so much the really complicated stuff up at the top, right? If we clear up the backlog of things that don't need to be this way, it frees up human capital to do other things. If the two of you were serving as your own accountants and running all of the little things that need to be done with this podcast and your companies, if you're doing all of that, you wouldn't have the time to actually create the things that you need to be creating, the stuff you need to be focused on. So that would be, it's maybe a bit of a surprise answer. I think others would say, hey, just tell planners to get out of the way and let me build what I want to build and trust me, it's going to be perfect. That doesn't work either.
Gary, you're speaking what sounds like to free market economies where you've got a specific division of labor where somebody does their job and that allows the other person to do theirs a lot better. And I think certainly
what a novel concept.
Yeah, well, it seems to escape a lot of people somehow. But with that being said, I really do think the introduction of technology, especially when it comes to things like inspections or, occupancy permitting, have you met these certain criteria? Here's your stamp and away you keep going, right? AI can check that. And we've got technology. It's already being piloted in some cities, I believe in Canada already. Whether or not we'll see its adoption and I mean, who knows? We'll see what happens in Vancouver here. But I think if on that same thread, if we look at the holistic look at the way our country is now evolving, and when it comes to housing specifically, can you share maybe your thoughts on the pace of this urbanization? And I think more interestingly to me, what our country and the housing around it might look like in 2050 if we actually get some of this process going like you just talked about.
Let's listen to this in 2050 and see how accurate this is. So I'm going to give you my thoughts on that. Now, how old am I? Am I going to be around in 2050? I hope so. I hope so. So if you look back 100 years ago, coming out of our last pandemic, and I've done this talk a few times over the last few years. I'm a nerd, being an urban planner. Nerds like to read and study books. So I thought it would be really interesting to see what happened in our cities 100 years ago out of the 1920 influenza. And out of that influenza, there was great hardship. People talk about the roaring 20s and thought that as we came out of COVID, that we would have our own version of the roaring 20s here. You have to remember that, yeah, jazz music and swing dancing and socializing and people getting back together was a thing, just like it was with us here, and concerts and hockey games, and just, there is great euphoria when we are together as people celebrating things. That is different. I just came out of the AC/DC concert, and it was pretty euphoric a couple days ago here in Vancouver. So that stuff is great to see, but it also led to great hardship. There was the rise of the KKK from 2,000 people to 2 million people in 4 to 5 years. There was urban-rural migration, and our cities began to get busier and more full. It created housing issues as people were leaving rural areas and looking for employment in urban areas. We had 50 million people that died. 500 million people were infected at that time. And coming out of a war where over 20 million people were killed. So it was incredible hardship that we came out of at that time. Technological changes that came out of it. We had these things that people wanted at home that they didn't want to get elsewhere. For example, we have to have food in our home because we're not sort of getting out and doing this stuff all the time. So the refrigerator, the washing machine, the radio was on the rise as a means of communication, and it was the way how people communicated, just like we do with Zoom or with this and putting information out there. So when you look at a lot of that change that was happening, it was super rapid coming out of that last pandemic. And then it led to the economic depression that we had in 1929, the stock market crash. I don't want to be giving a whole history lesson here. There were the rise of 8 or 9 dictators at the time and about a dozen tariffs, including the US putting tariffs on Canada and Canada putting retaliatory tariffs on the US. So it sounds super familiar, the hardship that we came out of, that nationalist thinking and the growth of our cities. So like it's eerie, right? It's eerie how similar all this is, and every year there's something else that happens. Maybe we haven't changed much as a human species, and the way that we react when we are locked up and go through hardship as a country, and we turn around and blame other people. Cooperating and collaborating, sharing, these types of things were forgotten back then. So I and I know it's polarizing to speak about stuff like this. You wouldn't ask me to be on your podcast if some of the stuff I was saying was not polarizing. But
the truth is hard to hear sometimes, Gary.
Yeah, it is, man. It is. So that's the context. Then out of that, well, our big reset was World War II. So I don't want to talk about that, but that's really how things boiled over at that point. And I hope that when we listen to this in 2050, when we're sitting in Ryan's basement on the couch he's still sitting on, and we pull this up and talk about the good old days, that we didn't say, hey, there was a war that happened. We're in a trade war right now. And hopefully there's some common sense that comes out of that. Urbanization, all that stuff happened, and it led to the rapid growth of our cities. So in 1950, it was about 30% of the global population lived in cities. By 2050, it's going to be close to 70%. In 2014, for the first time in the world's history, more people lived in cities than in rural areas. And that number is not letting up. Our GDP, our economies, our economic growth and well-being is all concentrated in urban areas. And that trend is going to continue, and it'll put pressure on the most successful cities. We're in a very land constrained region with our urban containment boundary and an ocean and mountains that kind of bind us, I guess. So it's going to lead to, we'll still have economic growth, and there will be housing pressure on a very land constrained region. That's where I think we are headed. And the strain and the legacy of historical zoning and the protection of single family neighborhoods where higher density projects were either on busy streets or in the downtown. And it's very, 2001 Space Odyssey, where I think they're gorillas or apes were hitting this tall monolith with rocks and things. We don't want something big and tall. I don't want to look at it. I don't think anybody has had their life endangered or died because a tower went up in their neighborhood.
Yeah.
Maybe they see in your swimming pool. That does happen. But I don't think it endangers your life.
I think
with
too
this type of stuff.
You get a lot of that perspective when you don't or fully understand maybe the problems that the city is facing when it comes to expansion, growth, and affordability in particular. It's one thing to have bought your home 30 years ago and to have realized that gain. And I understand completely that you want to protect it and that, it's what you're used to. But change is difficult, but it comes to all of us. And I think at the end of the day, if we continue to grow, we're looking for economic expansion and we're going to be a global city, it's inevitable that this is going to take place, especially when you consider the facts, which, like you mentioned, we have enormous geographical constraints here in this particular city. And so the degree of flexibility that people need in order to make it a city for all of us is going to be higher than it would be in somewhere like Dallas or something like that, where you have those big sprawls.
I agree with you. On the one side, our urban issues are very similar to these other cities around safety downtown, mental health issues, substance abuse, increasing disparity between different populations. But there is a difference in Vancouver with our geographic constraints. So the options that we have are a little more limited than some of these other places. I'm not a big advocate for continuing to just expand roads and continuing to build further out. I think we're going to have to do some of that, but we're still within a Metro Vancouver core area. It's not spreading too far beyond our three major provincial urban centers: Greater Victoria, Greater Vancouver, and Greater Kelowna. Those three areas are the big drivers. About 90% of the people that moved in the US in 2021 to 2022 only moved within 50 miles of the urban center. So they just moved outside a little bit. Big trend. So this mass exodus of people leaving cities and going somewhere else didn't happen. It'd be people moving from downtown Vancouver, maybe to the valley. Maybe people left inner city Burnaby and went out to Maple Ridge and bought a home there. And it was not just because of COVID and trying to get somewhere else. It'd be, I can now work from home. I can have some flexibility. Our office has the same. And we can do things like this with the use of technology. There was rapid change that came from a tech perspective that allowed us to change the way that we work and live. So there's embracing change like this as being something positive. So that change in a very land constrained region where there's going to be a lot of change really quick, it's going to create some urban stress. It's starting to already. There are people that are not fans of the Broadway corridor plan, but there's going to be a subway line that runs through there. When that subway line is open and the SkyTrain is running back and forth, I think a light bulb will go off for people then. It's hard for them to visualize right now because they are mourning the death of a neighborhood instead of celebrating the growth of their existing neighborhood into something more modern.
So it's become very apparent, Gary, that of course the way that you approach your job, if you will, is so much more than just trying to, let's say, grease the wheels between a developer and the city to get the next building up. You're literally looking at that 50,000 view and the 50,000 year view, if you will, about how humanity is changing and what their needs are and their desires are and how that evolves. And I find that a very interesting element of your work. And it leads me to my next
Well,
question, which
you
is
gave me ultimate power earlier on this podcast, didn't you?
of
So
course.
I had to take that view since you granted me that Bruce Almighty.
I think that's the best way to look at it, right? What can you do when you have the infinite power?
Mhm.
Okay, so then let's explore the next section. Obviously, post COVID, we are seeing a big shift in retail and office. And when you're talking with a developer, and some of these developers, I'm sure they've got master plan communities where they're putting up 18 towers, and it's going to take 20 years. What type of advice are you giving now with the shift that we've seen in retail, in the shift we've seen in office, and how do you see that over the next couple of decades?
So we worked on the rezoning of Oak Ridge Center. That is one that we are quite well known for as being the rezoning planners for West Bank, Ivanhoe, Cambridge at that time. It's now Quadreal as a partner in the project. We started that in 2012. The rezoning was done in 2014. It's 2025, and we're looking at end of 25 or 26 for occupancy permits number one. When I first took that project on, we were looking ahead from 2012, and we called it Oak Ridge 2025. What do you want Oak Ridge Center to look like in 2025? At that time, we thought we would get through rezoning, permits, hopefully a steady market, and it would be done by now. Like, we're just starting. What a great example to look at when it's a large scale project and the thinking you have to put into it. It is very long-term money right now. So the secret, I would say, from these big projects, let's talk about that for a sec before we get into retail and office. It's got to be buildable, financeable, sellable. And the only thing over the next few years in that category, they're going to be smaller projects. The majority will be smaller projects. And there's a whole bunch of reasons for it beyond just availability of capital. So with retail and office, two very different trajectories, I guess. Retail and shopping and being downtown, the shopping destinations of our streets here. I mean, take a look at Robson Street, take a look at Pacific Center. I think when Oak Ridge Center is open, for example, it's going to have a big impact on shopping downtown. So the experience of these shopping environments in downtown urban areas is very different. People just don't feel safe post-COVID for whatever reason, a whole bunch of reasons, in these highly urban environments. They just don't. So that's one shift. Number two is, and I'm the poster child for this, of Amazon and online shopping. The packages that roll into my office here I've got 4 boxes sitting right here. It's like Christmas every day. I don't even know what is coming in or what I've ordered. Something just shows up. So that Amazon era, and just look at how wealthy Jeff Bezos has become since all this changed. But that is a thing, and it has completely changed how we shop. There's so much more that is done online. The third one is office, and I don't know the exact stat. I can tell you in our office, we pulled out the reception desk because there aren't in-person meetings, put in a big communal area, even took out our boardroom and put in sofas to just make it a more comfortable, bit more casual work environment, to at least create a destination that people feel like it's home. Because there's a tendency, if I can work from home, I will. So it's those three things that are happening, particularly changes to retail and office, being able to shop from home and being able to work from home. Those are things. It was already headed that way. And I talked about how rapid change was during COVID. it's like we squeezed 5 years of tech changes into a year. And some of us, like, if this was pre-COVID, you would have been inviting me to a studio and we would have been waiting for time to align for the three of us to record this somewhere. And there would be a fourth or fifth person that would be working on the production of this. That's not what we're doing. So that's the difference that has happened. I don't know what the solution is. I know that those in-person shopping and work environments need to be experiences. And so you would need a reason to go to have that experience. Neither of you are coming to work in a cubicle. If you could be where you are, Ryan, right now, you're in a different city. The three of us are in different cities right now.
Yeah.
That's what I think the difference is.
Technology adds velocity, and it does also add, it adds opportunity and velocity when it's used correctly. And I think what you're really speaking to here is, if you're going to go to the office, or if you're going to go and have a retail or buy something at a retail shop, you're going to look for an experience in the same way that you go to a restaurant, right?
Exactly.
It's, for me, I have always had zero desire to go into a mall and shop for my clothes. My wife, on the other hand, that's what she would love to do.
Yeah.
I don't enjoy that experience. But when I go out for dinner at a very high-end restaurant or something like that, and I get that experience that I'm after, I go back and back and back. And I won't go and DoorDash a steak from Victor, right? I want to go to, a steakhouse because I want the experience. I want to enjoy that. And so I think that, we're largely going to see it. It used to be cultural going to the office. It used to be a necessity because technology didn't exist. And, I think for all of the bad things COVID it was also a catalyst in many ways for the velocity of technology. And we find ourselves here as a result of that, I think.
You're absolutely correct. I entirely agree with you, except the shopping for clothes part. I will do that.
That's just a function of time, Gary.
Yeah, I know. I don't have the time either. I make time for that. That is the one thing that I will do. If you need some help with that, just
Gary, I'm going to call you offline because I certainly need the help.
No problem. I will make my services available if you need some assistance with that. Hey, but everyone's different, right? You won't do that. I'll tell you what I can't do. No offense to IKEA. I cannot go in there and go shopping. Oh man, and getting lost in that maze and just looking at stuff that you need to be putting together if you buy it.
Totally.
No, it's not for me. So everyone's different. Yeah. Their shopping and the way that they work, everyone's got some different preference. It's not everyone's has to be shoehorned into a very specific geography. So we have that flexibility. Your commentary on technology and velocity, it does add velocity. Technology and robotics hopefully will add velocity to our construction industry by automating the production and help with our supply chain issues and at least deal with some of the labor shortages that we have. So I think technology is going to help there next. Hopefully AI and technology will be helping in the healthcare sector, where you don't have to use the naked eye to sort of do an assessment on something, that it can also be done through AI. All of that is moving ahead out of necessity right now. Yeah, we're behind on it. As a species, we're very good followers of things. And let's start thinking ahead, at least with some of the most critical things that are coming to us. The other things, speaking of getting ahead. Sorry, Ryan, you go ahead.
All I was going to say is that reminds me of, I don't know if you've ever read the essay called The Pencil. It was, it's the idea that a pencil is created by 1,000 different people and 1,000 different ideas from all different time frames coming together at one point. And, technology, I think, really exacerbates that theory and continues to build on that very theme. And, I'd love to see more technology in this process, because we see it in building form, we see it on the site, but we don't see it in the process. We don't see it in the development process, which is where it probably could be used in we've got large language models now that could do this process. It would laugh at the human, right? And as much as you might not like it, if you're a human being on the other side, a civil servant, it's coming for you whether you like it or not, just like it might be coming for our job at some point too. And
Yeah.
that's kind of a reality that we have to face. And
Hey, you know what's not coming to you as a job is shopping for clothes.
fair.
That will not be replaced by AI or robotics.
That's very fair. Very
So
fair.
I will always have a job with you hiring me for that. You're correct. You're correct with all of this. Let's look at the development application process. We don't need those 1,000 people that help to create a pencil assessing whether or not you've submitted everything on a checklist that goes into a city hall. It can be verified electronically that everything that you were supposed to submit has been submitted. And one of the key delays for development and building and housing applications is not submitting something that is full and compliant, because it may sit with somebody for several weeks or a month before it comes back and says it's not complete and you have to start over. Now you're a month behind right out of the gate. That's one. There should also be a tracker that shows where internally in the process of the people that are touching the pencil and touching your application of where it is green, where it is amber, and where it's red.
Careful, Gary. That's starting to sound like accountability.
No.
And solutions.
Yes.
Yeah, no kidding. I know there's a municipality that does this in California, and there's the manager is tracking all of this. I was on a podcast with this group first year of COVID, like 2020, I think fall of 2020. I don't know why municipalities here never implemented it. I could guess why. I don't want to be sort of piling on public servants because it's not a job that many people, choose to go into.
Yeah.
But there has to be a revamping of that industry on the public service side regarding timelines. There has to be,
agree.
right?
Yeah, 100%.
You could not get by saying, here's a project. You would not hire me for a project. And I would say, I don't know how long it's going to take. It's probably about a year.
Yeah, no.
Right?
Not when you have consistent interest payments coming every single 2 weeks that you know what you're going to what your cost is a year from today. It's
Correct.
impossible for me to do that deal. It would just never happen.
Just go to the bank and say, I might pay in about a year. See how that works out. See if they work on your time frame.
Yeah, and if you're successful doing that, let me know.
For sure.
So the other part of sort of change in the industry beyond just technology and robotics and accountability, on our side of the industry, we have to start looking ahead and creating product for those markets that are going to need it. And I'm really big on housing for millennials and housing for seniors. Two underserved parts of the housing spectrum, but very different needs. And this is why I think us working with municipalities to get ahead of the regulations on small scale multiplex housing should be a thing. And if we can work to speed up what's accepted as multiplex applications with floor plans that we've come up with at work, with setbacks and guidelines and heights and sizes that work in certain municipalities. Not every municipality is on board with the provincial bills. Some will say we already allow multiplex because we have a house, a basement suite, and a laneway. There's your 3 units. There's others that will say, no, we're going to be a part of some bold changes. Burnaby's one of them. Burnaby said, we'll do this. We'll urbanize. It's a very European model for cities. We're about 100 years behind, I guess, in terms of the scale of development that happened. The people who don't like our big housing projects have always said, why can't you build something lower and sort of blanket it through neighborhoods? Well, that's what we're doing. I mean, you're still not happy, a lot of those people. So it just sort of exposes what their thinking was. It's, what's mine is mine. What's yours is mine. I don't want anyone else living around here. I'm not like that.
I was told that when I got married. That listen, my dad told me that. He said, "Hey, listen, Ryan,
Mm.
what's Sarah's is Sarah's, and what's yours is also hers." It
Well,
was good advice.
yeah, it is good advice, and it's correct actually. It's correct. Yeah.
So Gary, I think
Except the clothes that you go shopping for, we'll give you that one. Those are yours. Your 2 shirts and your 3
Yep,
pants. Those are all yours.
that's right. Shop like a man in the 20s.
Yeah.
30 years has clearly given a lot of experience and education and knowledge. And we know, sort of true to your nature, that you are now turning and educating others as well. So I think just to kind of wrap things up here, can you expand and share with our viewers and listeners here more about your development course? Because I know like what you've shared in just, the last 40 minutes is immensely powerful and so valuable. And I'm sure a lot of people would love to kind of learn more, take it to the next steps. And this is exactly what you're offering. So yeah, please let us know what people can do to learn more about your development course.
Thank you both for offering this space for me to speak. We've crossed paths originally through our mutual friend, Bill Laidler, who's done an incredible job of creating a community around real estate, business, development, home builders. And he kind of fell into the education side by accident, but he's very good at it. I think what he's done is created a great community of like-minded people that challenge the status quo and see a model of new housing that they can be a part of. So that's kind of where it started. Was this relationship with Bill and meeting people like the both of you. On the personal journey side, and I have spoken about this many times, is a massive heart attack I had in 2019. Went to cardiac arrest. I barely survived. I had a 0.1% chance of survival. Remember everything about dying and then waking up out of a coma 2 days later. Talk about a life-changing experience. I'm happy just to get up every morning. I'm happy just to be around. And in working in a very stressful industry, but still wanting to have an impact. And so I feel that there is a personal message that I would really like people to know about the work that we do. And it's doing good things with good people. It is being a part of a future in terms of housing solutions. I know people talk about, I'm going to do this for my kids and the next generation. You have to go even deeper than that, right? Of like why we do what we're doing. There's a belief system that we have with this home building industry and being a part of it, whether it's the creative side of it, or whether it's a number side of it. There's something that just appeals to us. Tap into that. And so that, for me, has helped with this education side and putting some of this message out. I've helped developers with large-scale development projects and will continue to do so. I have some great partners and people that I work with, and I cherish those friendships and working relationships. But also we want to be part of a bigger solution, and why not give people the tools to be a part of a housing revolution that is coming, so everyone can end up being a part of that future. So that's the shift that I've made with some of the work that I do with Bill Laidler, his academy. What a wonderful man. What a great family he has, and the reasons why he's doing this. It all started with him getting involved in multiplex and wanting to have his kids' grandparents live nearby. So it's a personal journey as much as a professional one. So the professional side, it's 6 modules that we'll be teaching on a weekly basis through Laidler Academy, through Bill's network. Really hope people take advantage of it and listen. We're going to talk about what shaped our cities. We've talked a bit about that today, how that impacts the work that we do. So it's understanding the why. Why are we here now at this point in our history? And then it's going to get into the how, how people can get into being part of the solution of the next era of housing development. I look at millennials and seniors as being underserved. I see the multiplex housing story being a part of that. Doesn't mean it's going to take everything over, right? It's not like when condos had their big rise here in the 90s that it took over the entire housing market. It became a thing and it became a player, and it took a while. At that time, people were thinking, you're going to invest in a real estate airspace parcel? It'll never go up in value. You're crazy. Put your money in land and in dirt. Now look at it. At that time, it was revolutionary. So there is this new era of housing that is coming. It's happened in other parts of North America. It's not just a thing here. And it certainly happened in Europe for a century. So that's sort of the life chapter and professional chapter where I'm at, and want to sort of get this message out so people can be a part of that future of housing. That's largely what this course is going to focus on, to give people the tools.
That's fantastic. It sounds very intriguing, and I'm certainly excited to join and learn from you further. We will, of course, include links to that course within the show notes here. So anybody else who would like to learn more, or ideally register and see how our cities are evolving, how they can get further educated on development, Gary is the man, clearly, for that. So Gary, thank you so much for your time today. We really appreciate this, and appreciate what you do to help evolve cities from, again, that 50,000 foot view and the 50,000 year view, because it's truly, truly important, and it does affect the way all of us live and interact with one another. So as always, everyone, thank you so much for tuning in and listening. We will see you here next week. Bye.